Now, if you rely too much on your intuition and not enough on your system two, not enough on your effortful weighing the options, making careful decisions, you might get into trouble, because the system one automatic process is very efficient, very fast, and it's very good at making quickie decisions. But oftentimes it is biased. One example of a common cognitive bias that we have is called a confirmation bias. With a confirmation bias, you are looking for information that supports your ideas, and you are more or less ignoring or dismissing information that doesn't. So, for example, politically, let's say you are politically a conservative. Well, you're going to spend a lot of time watching Fox News, which is a channel that is on the more conservative bent. If, however, you are more liberal, if you identify yourself as liberal, then you're going to watch MSNBC, let's say. And in these kind of cases, essentially, you're paying attention to the information that supports your ideas. You cite it, you agree with it. Stuff that does not support your ideas, you always find some kind of flaw with it. Problem with this is you got flaws on both sides of the issue, but you're only paying attention to the flaws on the side you disagree with. You are promoting the view that you believe in, buttering it up, so to speak, but the information you don't agree with, you are very dismissive of. And this is confirmation bias, and we'll only try to find this, and researchers can be guilty of this as well. If you're a researcher who wants to show evidence to support your theory in your research, well, you might either intentionally or unintentionally be searching for research articles that support your theory, and either ignore or be very highly critical of research that does not support your theory. So even scientists can be guilty of the confirmation bias, which is why it's a good idea when you're doing research to do a complete literature search of findings that do not support your beliefs, as well as findings that do, if it's in the same general area. That way you can get a more accurate picture of what you're studying. Hindsight bias is a common one. We basically report that, yeah, we could have predicted that. We falsely report that we predicted it. So when LSU wins a baseball game, you would say, oh, I knew they would win. Of course, you know after they won, not before. And you assume that you knew before that they won. Well, if you were so sure that they were going to win, why didn't you bet some money on it, perhaps? And, but of course you're not going to do that. You're relying on your hindsight bias. It's much easier to predict things that have already happened than to predict things in the future. You've often seen a hindsight bias when it came to the financial crisis in 2008. Basically, you have a whole bunch of experts today talking about how they predicted this would have happened before then. But really, most of them are just relying on hindsight bias. Yeah, you could see all the things that led to it after it already happened. The subprime mortgage crisis, and the indiscriminate lending by banks, the stuff like that. I mean, you could always look back and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But now, it's a lot easier to do it from after it's already happened than before. The availability heuristic is another important bias that we fall victim of, is that we tend to remember things that easily come to mind. Okay? So if we have a lot of experience with something, these are the kinds of things that we do. If you watch the news, and you might see on the news pictures of African Americans who have been arrested, let's say. And you see all this, and you see these crimes committed by African Americans. Well, when you think criminal, you might think African American, because of what is available to you, because of what easily comes to mind based on watching the news, when in reality it is not quite that simple. So we make mistakes when we are relying too much on what easily comes to mind, because what easily comes to mind may not actually be accurate. It just might be from our own personal experience, what we've seen, but it doesn't necessarily fit statistically with reality. Which kind of brings us to this base rate fallacy, which involves statistics. You are ignoring information about general principles, making a specific decision. In textbooks, it talks about how, you heard that a majority of people like this particular television set. That the research, essentially, the surveys have shown this. But then you have one friend who hated it, so you're going to just rely on that friend rather than what the majority of users said. So we kind of pay attention to the one information that is right there with us, but we ignore all of the data that show otherwise. Here's an example of making of the base rate fallacy mistake. Let's say I were to tell you that I have a man here named John. He is a mild-mannered, neat, tidy person who's very quiet and organized. Okay? And I'm going to ask you, is John a farmer or is John a librarian? What is your answer? Most of you would probably say that John is a librarian, because that is what we associate as someone who is neat and tidy and everything like that. But reality is that there are a hell of a lot more farmers than there are librarians. So we might be making this judgment about this neat and tidy person, but maybe there are like 10 times as many farmers as there are librarians, yet we are making a judgment of, yep, this is a librarian. So we're ignoring the numbers. We are ignoring the fact that there are a lot more farmers than librarians. So the better way to make that decision is, we might say, well, maybe those characteristics seem like they are typical of the prototypical librarian. But if we're talking about strict odds, it's probable that more likely the person is a farmer than it is a librarian, just because of the sheer numbers. And that's that base rate fallacy. We're ignoring the big picture. We're ignoring the numbers there. Finally, the representativeness heuristic is, we're making judgments based on stereotypes. If we are to, again, you're thinking about a particular, what is the image? We're thinking about a criminal, the image of the criminal. We might make our judgment based on stereotypes rather than reality. Again, because we say, oh yeah, that person is representative of what I'm looking for. So you're looking at particular, let's say you're looking at a police lineup. And in a police lineup, the person who dressed in very messy clothing and maybe has a mean look on his face. You say, yeah, that looks like a criminal to me. That represents it for me. So that's the person I'm going to pick on the lineup. But you're making your judgment based on stereotypes, not based on accurate information. So here's the thing: what makes all these decision-making biases, what's common among them, is that they all are using this system 1 automatic process of decision-making, because these biases are quick, fast, and this is the first thing that comes to our mind when we are trying to make decisions. And unfortunately, it can lead to many inaccuracies. So we can't completely rely on those short-term, quick heuristics. We kind of have to step back and think for a moment.